afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give it just a minute or two longer here to see if we get some more people joining in. But welcome to part two of our webinar series. I'm using customer experience to grow your business. Thank you guys for joining. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with introductions and we can get started here, Vince. My name is Taylor Clifford. Thank you all for coming today, and thank you for coming last week to part one. For those of you just joining the series for the first time today, welcome. We will be going through throughout the next hour the ways you can use customer experience data in order to grow your business. Now, with the basis of the platform that we use here at Johnson Consulting Group, Performance Tracker. Two of the things that we always like to highlight in the customer experience process completely is client feedback. So hearing directly from our families and receiving survey reviews from them, and also the sales data. So last week was focused on sales data analytics, and this week will be focused more on that voice of the customer, the voice of the family side of things. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything kicked off here. Joined with me today is Vince Roberts. He is our senior business consultant at Johnson Consulting Group. And Vince is going to kick things off here at the beginning of the presentation, and we're going to kind of go back and forth. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout in either our chat or the Q&A section. We will be checking and answering questions throughout as well. And Vince, I'm going to go ahead and shift it off to you.
Thanks, Taylor, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I know it's often difficult to take an hour out of your busy schedules to join a webinar such as this, but we really appreciate you joining. And it's a subject that we know well as funeral service professionals, whether it's at the funeral home or at the cemetery, customer experience. We know that it's priority number one for why we exist as organizations. It's often the messaging that we're telling our communities regarding our differentiation with our competitors. It's how we motivate our teams oftentimes on serving our clientele to the highest and best capabilities. But the focus today really is in the last phrase of the title, growing the business, using customer experience to grow the business. We know that customer experience not only is the right thing to do, exceptional world-class customer experience, arguably the right thing to do for every family that comes through the door. It's good for our families, but it also is a key driver for growing funeral home and cemetery businesses. We are fortunate at Johnson Consulting Group to have a whole host of data, a pile of data from years and years, hundreds and thousands of survey returns from client families across North America. What we're looking at on the screen is data from last year. And one of the questions that I like to dig into to really understand the consumers of my clients is when we ask how you heard or why you chose the funeral home or cemetery. And perhaps it's unsurprising, but what we do see is that there are a lot of experiences that are buried in these reasons. We know that oftentimes the biggest reason that a family chooses or decides to come to your funeral home is because they were previously served. There's a degree of heritage, there's a relationship, there's prior experience buried into that decision. There's also a lot of families that choose a funeral home or a cemetery because they were recommended or referred by someone they trust, a colleague, a friend, maybe a family member. So we also know that there's an experience buried in there too, because an experience provided the recommendation. So, when we look at this data, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, even when we look at it for particular clients of ours. But one of the things I like to do is just differentiate this data in two distinct categories. And those categories are, what are those reasons where there is a customer experience that's buried? in that reason. And then what are the reasons that families choose a funeral home that are purely different, purely non-experience based, as I have written here, whether it's just the convenient location of the establishment, or maybe they just had something unique about the facilities, or maybe it was a decision that was prompted by price or price alone. As you can tell, last year across North America, well over 2/3 of families chose a funeral home for what we would consider to be an experience-based reason. So whether that was a previous experience, something to do with the firm's reputation, coming highly recommended from a person or an organization, or simply the initial contact. So clearly, we all sort of know this intuitively, but the data also confirms it, that customer experience and the experiences we're providing to our client families today are really the biggest driver of our market share growth in the future. So as a consultant who's working with funeral home and cemetery clients monthly, one of the key metrics that we are watching and monitoring and managing are our customer experience metrics. Oftentimes, as business owners or operators, you may be meeting monthly or quarterly with your leadership team. You're looking at key performance metrics of your business, oftentimes financial, maybe sales, market share. You may look at customer experience metrics as well, but the majority of the metrics you're looking at are actually what happened last month or last quarter or last year. And customer experience metrics are a little unique because they give us a little bit of a peek into the future because of what we're looking at on the screen now, the reasons that families choose funeral homes. So if we're looking at customer experience metrics, then we're getting a little insight into what the future of our business looks like, because we know that the experiences we're providing today are going to influence decisions in the future. So if you're using a survey program, whether it's Performance Tracker or another one, I'd highly encourage you to, if you're not already, keep the key customer experience metrics front and center for your staff, your leadership team especially, month to month, quarter to quarter. Some of the metrics that are very important to us in our monthly management meetings with our clients are some that you may be familiar with. So the idea of this first one, NPS, that stands for Net Promoter Score. If you're not familiar with Net Promoter, I'll talk a little bit about it in a moment, but it's used outside of funeral service as well. It's a very well-known metric based on a question of likelihood to recommend. There are other metrics that I'll unpack a little bit in the presentation. The OPS, which stands for Overall Performance Score, the TVI, which stands for Total Value Index, and then the response rate, obviously, which is an indicator of the sample size that we have. And I am very fortunate to work with clients that have response rates north of 40 and sometimes even north of 50%, which is really exceptional. In the funeral home, when we talk about growing a business through customer experience, fundamentally what we're talking about is creating experiences for our client families that are so good that they are going to be telling a friend, that we have exceeded an expectation to a degree that we've created what we like to call a brand ambassador. Now, what I have on the screen now is at the bottom is what could be thought of as the journey of your client family through your establishment. And when we think about customer journey or client journey, one of the things that in the funeral service world we sometimes confuse or conflate is that these really truly represent the touch points, the client interaction, the family interaction points along their journey. And I'll unpack this a little bit further in a few slides so that you can pay extra close attention to these, because there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes at the funeral home that sometimes we sort of overlap or confuse with that client journey. There's upwards of 100 tasks that need to be completed for every family. Back office, preparation room, filing the death certificate, gathering clothing. There's a whole host of details, right? But the great advantage and challenge and privilege that we have in funeral service is that our client families are very much primed to remember their experience with us because of the sensitivity of the nature of their loss. And then the other piece of this is that there are probably about 7 or 8, depending on the type of service that we're providing, 7 or 8 key touch points that we need to be very focused on in creating what we like to call brand ambassadors. So in order to create a brand ambassador, one of the things we like to talk about is that we need to exceed an expectation, right? So that we need to gauge expectations. We need to be able to train our teams to gauge expectations, but also train our teams to surprise and delight, to wow. And I've said that to funeral directors who are overworked and tired, and I see them sink in their chairs. But it's not all about doing more, more, more. Oftentimes, it's about being more intentional with the interactions that we have. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. The key, of course, to creating brand ambassadors is to exceed the expectations, hopefully, at every stage of the client journey, of the family's journey through your funeral home. Again, the degree to which we exceed those expectations really reflects the degree to which we are creating brand ambassadors and the degree to which we're growing our market share organically through customer experience. This little diagram of smiley faces that you see on the screen is also a sort of an explanation of net promoter. So the idea of net promoter is how likely are you to recommend our funeral home to a friend, family, or colleague? It's a scale from 1 to 10. And as you can see, that those responses are broken up into 3 groups, the detractors, the passives, and the promoters. And net promoter score is all of the promoters minus the percentage of the detractors. So it really takes into consideration the folks who are having a very, very positive experience that are going to be telling a friend, family, or colleague, and then those who might be telling a friend, family, or colleague that they had a bad experience. So we like to, again, watch and monitor this metric along with those others because it's a key driver for growing market share at the funeral home or cemetery. I've often spoke with clients and in workshops that we do about some of the privileges and call them advantages even of operating a business in the funeral profession. One I mentioned is that our client families are generally going to remember their experience. It's not every purchasing experience in your life that you're going to remember to such detail that you do a funeral experience. That's obviously a great privilege that we have in this profession, but it's also a bit of an advantage over some of the other professions, some of the other types of customer experiences that are provided in your daily life. The other unique advantage, I'd call it, in funeral service is that we have great teams. I've not met too many folks who work at a funeral home that don't want to be having meaningful impacts on the lives of people in their community. And so if everyone wants to be providing 10 out of 10 service, and our families are going to remember their experiences, then what's really the issue, right? Well, the issue is something that we talk about, and John DeJulius talks about as being something called service aptitude. So this book, The Customer Service Revolution, is a fundamental piece of some of the customer experience workshops that we facilitate with our clients. Both Nelson, who facilitated our last webinar last week, and myself are licensed coaches with John's program and licensed to use his material and methodology to our funeral home and cemetery clients. And in the workshops, we talk about service aptitude, and it's a very important concept because it's all about a person's ability to recognize and exceed opportunities to exceed those customer expectations, regardless of the circumstances. And it's really the times where things go wrong, where service aptitude is revealed. And we all know that certain folks on our team have higher levels of service aptitude and others perhaps not so much. Often it falls on leadership shoulders to develop service aptitude. And what I'll do here is give you a couple of tools to be utilizing at your firms to grow service aptitude and thereby grow your market share using customer experience. So service aptitude, as John describes it, is really born out of or developed out of our previous life experiences, our prior work experiences, and then our current work experiences. And this makes a lot of sense because each of us have unique backgrounds. We bring different experiences to the table. Every team member at your funeral home is coming to your place of employment with a different set of skills and prior experiences. But it's up to us as leaders at certain funeral home establishments, funeral home operations, to set the standards. And one of the tools that you can use, if you don't have already, is what we describe as a playbook or a set of service standards for each one of those touch points of the customer journey. That image on the screen is the set of service standards for what would be a committal service at a cemetery, for example. So it's very small. If you're on the call today and have questions about service standards, feel free to reach out to me. This is a key tool, sort of a key piece of workplace infrastructure that can help in setting the expectations and holding our teams accountable and having our teams hold one another accountable to who we are as an organization. The other part of our CX programs, which I'll just briefly mention, is the utilization of this three-column approach that you see. So for every stage of the customer's journey, we also want to assess what can go wrong, what can get in the way of us delivering on our standards. And that would constitute what we call the service defects. Conversely, we also want to brainstorm some of the ways in which we can surprise, delight, or simply wow client families to be exceeding those expectations at each one of these stages. That would be that green column that you see, often titled Above and Beyond or Service Excellence. So it's amazing when we do those workshops to hear from the steering committees or the groups who are present, because when you sort of take the limiter off, there's a lot of creativity that starts to bubble up. And that's what we try to document and then utilize going forward to create those exceptional experiences for your clients. There are, as I described, usually somewhere in the range of 6 to 8 key touch points for a funeral home and even at the cemetery as well. So there aren't that many interaction points that your staff or team has in order to really surprise, delight, wow, or exceed expectations. So those service standards that I described are going to be a useful tool for any funeral home or cemetery operator. But additionally, what you want to be able to do, ideally, is to be able to measure these touch points, measure the customer experience at these points of customer interaction. Our method for doing that in aggregate is that OPS score that I mentioned at the second slide. That OPS score is really an aggregate score of all of these touch points, these points of customer and team interaction. We can also isolate the different touch points. For example, we can really focus directly on the arrangement conference, and oftentimes we do. We can look at even initial contact, which is sometimes a challenge for many funeral homes. But once we start to look at the OPS score, as well as the different touch points along the way, we can start to highlight some areas of opportunity and growth for the funeral home to better improve their customer experience. You know, oftentimes what we see is a very limited amount of interaction that takes place in this last stage, the continuing care stage of the customer journey. That continuing care, sometimes it's just, you know, your aftercare visit. Maybe it's a pre-need counselor that reaches out. Maybe there's some grief resources. But when we talk about continuing care, one of the great advantages of our clients, whether you are using Performance Tracker currently or are interested in it, is some of the real-time feedback we receive in the form of lead generation. Even before getting on the call today, I receive a lot of the real-time feedback from the survey program for the clients that I work with. So I see a lot of lead alerts, as they're called, and these are real-time feedback. Even getting on the call today, one came through that a family was looking for grief support resources. So what a great way for that that client of ours, that funeral home, to be able to continue to provide exceptional value and continue to provide exceptional experiences even following the traditional services. But Taylor, I'll turn things over to you because I know you really know this lead generation program so well in Performance Tracker.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, I mean, lead generation is just one of the many alert types that come out of Performance Tracker. When Vince was speaking earlier on the Net Promoter Score, we actually have a different alert type for a detractor alert, a passive alert, and a promoter alert, all just depending on the score that the family gives. But what's really special about the alerts is when you receive one of these lead generations, because it's not only providing you a chance to communicate with your family again, but it's really providing an opportunity for you to continue to fulfill their needs. And that it stems from, I mean, anything from pre-need to grief support, like what Vince said. But what's really special about the survey is not only does this provide another sales opportunity for you and your team, which I know in the funeral profession we are very careful about talking about sales in general, just because we're really here to connect with our families, and that's really what funeral directors care about the most. But with the survey, we've actually been able to establish over 10,000 pre-need leads, and that was the data that we had from last year's survey. So this year we expect it to rise even more, and that's essentially pre-need opportunities that would not have existed had it not been for that final ask of, are you interested in learning more information? Basically, are you interested in continuing this journey in us trying to fulfill your needs? So, also a really fun statistic that I love to use is that one of our larger clients, who is a corporate base, they have several locations throughout the country. It's at 70 plus rooftops. They actually generated 82% of their pre-need leads from our survey. And that's a statistic they gave us back in 2022. So that's really exciting for anyone who's looking to grow their business in general, but also just receiving more information from your families and continuing that touch point. So those alerts actually come to you in real time. You receive them via email, which is very special, and something that I love about the modern age of surveying is you don't have to wait for a paper survey to go through the mail process and be sent back to you. You can actually just receive it right when a family is asking for more. And I'm sure that timeliness of delivery on all of your services, which is one of the things that we rate on, is going to be at the top of your family's mind. So they're going to be pretty impressed that you're reaching out to them so quickly.
Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, the fact that it's real-time feedback's extraordinarily valuable. And it's also a piece of providing additional value to your families following your services. That sort of segues into one of the sort of key analyses that I do for many of my clients that sort of cross-pollinates or takes into consideration the data that we receive from the survey itself, the experiences, and also what's on the contract. What were the services and goods selected? What was the money spent by the family, so to speak? And also looking very carefully at value. There is a question on the survey in Performance Tracker. If you're a Performance Tracker client, you know this. How satisfied were you with the value of the products and services you received based on the price you paid? This is a really a very important question. You could have obviously a very satisfied family from an experience standpoint, but they still may be seeing value a little less than a 5 out of 5. I like to look at this data in a few different ways, often by location, sometimes even by arranger. But in this case, we're looking at consumer value by case type. And we're also able to look at the associated average sales for this particular client. Uh, this, in my opinion, is a very important uh, type of analyses for the future of many funeral home establishments. You could sort of think to yourself, what is going to happen if the value that your direct cremation families are saying is extraordinarily higher than every value score you see with service. Now, in this situation, the differences are fairly marginal, but you do see that for our traditional burial families, they have one of the highest average sales down near the bottom at nearly 11,500, and yet the value score is one of the lowest. So for this particular client, we would want to really think creatively about ways to improve the value for that particular experience, those traditional burial families. The other piece or sort of key difference I like to look for is the difference between our direct cremation value score and the cremation with memorial value score. To me, that represents one of the big sort of leading indicators for a health of a funeral business. Are the cremation with service families seeing value in those cremation services, the memorialization that's associated with those cremations? So very, very important type of analyses. Additionally, as you could well imagine, this is a very useful type of analysis to do in the lead up to some of the pricing decisions that you may need to make at your funeral home. So annually, we like to look at this and just get a sense. It's one data point for how our families are interpreting, so to speak, the pricing and associated services that they're receiving. So Nelson talked last week in depth about creating and managing to a funeral home budget, a revenue budget. This is an added layer to that to really get some insight from our consumers, our actual client families, into the prices that they're paying and the associated values that they're saying. The other thing I'll mention on this slide is that often we have clients who have response rates well over 35%, sometimes over 40. I even have one client that flirts around 50% response rate. So you can also imagine how valuable that sample is. You're hearing essentially from 1 in 2 families that's purchasing funeral goods and services from you. So a really sort of added layer of analysis that I would recommend if you use Performance Tracker, reach out to us if you're not comfortable or familiar with how to do this.
Really quick, Vince, I do want to mention too, I don't traditionally come from the funeral profession, and I've been here at Johnson Consulting for about 3 years now. But prior to that, my experience was still in surveys and collecting data from outside consumers. And I will say that the difference between just any other type of consumer, whether it be hospitality or auto services, anything like that, the response rates with funeral and cemetery and just death care in general surveys is outstanding. So, I mean, the families, whether they had a bad experience or a good one, they're going to want to share that they had an experience and that that they saw value in it. I will say, Vince was mentioning almost 50% for some of our clients. The average hovers around 35 to 40. But what I will say is in other businesses, it's anywhere from 5 to 10% for just general consumer surveys. So clearly families are caring enough to provide their feedback with the funeral services.
Absolutely. Thanks, Taylor. So moving along to another topic about how, again, getting back to this idea of growing market share through customer experience. Clearly, we understand this, that the experiences we're providing today is able to grow market share in the future. What's always an interesting analysis for my clients is to really truly understand the percentage of your families that are coming to you or learning about you through recommendation or referral. This can vary pretty widely. And it's always interesting to me as far as how do we leverage this further to grow market share. The other side of this equation is that what percentage of your marketing or promotional budget is actually allocated to customer experience. If we know that customer experiences are providing about 70% of your clients, then what percentage of your marketing budget is really allocated to upskilling your team with service aptitude or crafting service standards or simple in-house training or in-service training for customer experience? I'll share with you a real world example here that I found very fascinating. This came out of a monthly performance management meeting with a client just last month, actually. So what we see here as we were reviewing the performance for January through May of this year is that we have been really exceeding budget by a very large margin for our traditional burial call volume. In a high cremation market, this is, you know, a blessing, perhaps. I mean, we'll take it all day. But we started to ask ourselves, what's going on here? Why are we seeing so many more families than budget? You see that the report suggests we're at 51 calls for burial traditional at need. The budget was 34. And that was actually purely based on marginal call volume growth, case mixes that were consistent with trends of the last 3 years, and also fairly conservative growth in overall call volume. So it's not as if that 34 calls was undershooting. It was a very reasonable budget, and yet we're about 17 calls above and beyond. So what we're able to do with a tool like Performance Tracker is drill right down into the surveys of those 51 families. And it turns out that the sample of surveys was about a 54% sample. So I think that equates to 26, 27 surveys. So again, of the 51 calls we had for traditional burial at this location, we had completed surveys from about 26 or 27 of them. And what we can go to is the question, how did you hear about this funeral home? And we, again, continued to evaluate this. And what we found is that 11 of these families, 11 of the sample, that's about 42%, I believe, heard about or came to this funeral home because of a recommendation from a person, from an organization, or from an online review, which we still consider that sort of experience-based type of reason. So it was really astounding. And this is a firm that really takes customer experience very seriously and is truly a world-class type of organization when it comes to customer experience. But year-to-date in May, those additional calls equated to over $150,000 in revenue. So first 5 months of the year, the additional volume just in this one case type that came through recommendation and referral business over $150,000. So a really great example of growing organically through that idea of brand ambassador, of exceeding expectations, of really just creating those exceptional experiences. All right, I'm going to share with you next another example of sort of the usage of a tool like Performance Tracker using not only the sales data, but also the data that comes through on the survey side. There's an old phrase about spending on advertising. I think it's like something along the lines of half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. I just don't know which half, right? I think we've all heard something like that. And that's sort of true. When you're spending on growing your business, you're likely putting dollars in a variety of sort of channels or buckets, right? You're spending on maybe digital advertising, maybe pre-need advertising, maybe a billboard or a TV spot here and there, centers of influence in the community, relationships, customer experience. There's a whole host of ways that you can spend money on funeral home and cemetery marketing. But it's very valuable, of course, to be able to measure return on investment. That's a hard thing in the marketing world. This particular client that we're showing an example about, this was a client that really wanted to understand the dollars that were coming in that were associated with their social media spend. So what we did was we can go into the data and dig through and find those surveys that indicated that they learned about the funeral home through social media. We can also, as you can see, associate the value scores that they ascribed and the contract value. So we can see the revenue that's associated with this particular marketing channel. Uh, Now, keep in mind, this is also a sample. So if this client, for example, was receiving a 40% response rate, there's still another 60% of their families that might be also hearing about their firm through social media. So in many cases, we assume that the sample is representative, meaning that it represents the full case volume, so to speak. But in this case, we'll just take it on face value that the $76,000 that was generated that was it, right? Even if that was it. If we assume that this firm is operating at a 31% EBITDA margin, so if their EBITDA is 31%, which is at the upper sort of threshold of what we see as a benchmark currently, that would be about $24,000 in EBITDA coming off of these contracts alone. If they spent $12,000 on social media, for example, then the ROI is 100%. Pretty straightforward math. But the point is that you can do the math if you have a tool like this and you're using it to its full potential. And this also goes for every other reason that you see on that survey example. Maybe you want to measure TV or radio or print. That's all possible. And it's something that we often do with our clients quarterly or even month to month, watching these types of things. So I'm going to shift gears here and actually pass it over to Taylor to talk a little bit more about social media and social media reviews.
Thank you so much, Vince. So give me 2 seconds here to just get my screen up. So I decided when we were talking about creating this webinar that it was going to be really important for us to, transition from the marketing piece of, here we go. Oops, sorry about that. Gotta come through. Sorry, my screen is like not letting me click. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So I decided early on that it was going to be really important for us to talk about the impact of social media. And that's going to be, the future, and it's also the present of where we're at right now. I work with a lot of funeral homes through Performance Tracker X, who currently, or prior to coming to Performance Tracker, weren't tracking their Google reviews, their social media reviews, which is essentially your online reputation, your public reputation of what the community, of what families previously served is saying about you and your business and the experiences that they had. So, first and foremost, social proof is essentially just the tendency of consumers to conform to what they're reading online, the experiences that others are having. And I am not making this up. This is how everyone, especially in this day and age, are finding businesses in general. I mean, if you think of it as you're trying to go to dinner with your family, especially if you just moved to that city, or if you have never, let's say, never gone out to a restaurant before, it's similar to how a lot of families have never experienced a death before, is where I'm getting at with that. You're going to go to the internet, you're going to go to a search engine to try and find some experiences that others have had. And that's really what you're going to gauge how you're going to choose that business. Now, it's actually been studied that 86% of consumers are choosing a business based on what online reviews are saying about their business. So that's not just rated on the score. So if we're using Google reviews, for example, it is on a 5-star scale. It's also going to be the comments, whether or not the family is seeing, or the consumer, I should say, is seeing that the business took the time to respond to people who took the time to leave a review. It's going to be a lot of different factors, and all of those things are going to equate to your search engine optimization, or your SEO, which is essentially the ranking and where your business shows up when a Google search or a search engine is looking for a funeral or a cemetery. And if they're just Googling, funerals near me, or how to plan my funeral ahead of time, or something like that, your business would be one of the first to pop up. Now, I will say as well that the social reviews that are left on a page, so whether that be through Bing or Google, it is the second most important factor in impacting a ranking of where you're at. Is going to be where your social reviews lie and what your scoring is there. And you can see here that, 3 in 5 customers are going to be requiring 4+ stars from a business. So it's really important to be trying to gather those Google reviews, those social media reviews in general, and not just from the positive experiencing families, not just from the negative experiencing families. You really want a good mixture in there, and you want a high volume, because of course, the higher the volume, the less impact a negative review is going to have on your overall score. Now, one of the things that can actually come from your increased ranking in your search engine optimization is going to be attracting more traffic to your website. So it's going to help with your click-through rates, which in turn then again helps your rankings. So they work hand in hand, and it's all coming from the amount of reviews that are on your page that are really going to be driving those metrics up for your business. Now, one of the things that I get a lot of questions on with users of Performance Tracker, or even just survey takers in general, is going to be how to mitigate negative reviews. Because, of course, with Performance Tracker in our system, I do want to clarify that we have an internal survey that goes out to families after their service. But again, these are social media reviews. They're public. They're online for everyone to see. And you're going to see some of those negative reviews come in. But when you're managing how you respond to families, always highlight the empathy and the resolution that your business did in order to solve their issue. I can guarantee that the response alone on a social media post is going to have a big impact. It's actually been statistically proven that businesses with scores that are lower, so like a 4.7, a 4.8 on Google, are going to have a better performance than businesses that have a perfect 5 score and have, maybe like 5 reviews and no activity on their page. It's not all score related. It's a lot of the engagement that happens. And then consumers are smart. They're going to look and see that you're really caring about your online reputation. Now, how to gain more reviews, because as I said, volume is really important, especially if you do have a couple of negative ones on there. You're going to want to promote it. Now, that's both digitally and verbally. One of the things that's really special about Performance Tracker X, which is our survey, our sales analytics hub, it's really our customer experience platform. That's how we refer to it. You are intended to manage the entire customer experience through Performance Tracker X. we actually promote social reviews at the end of our digital surveys that go out. So the survey is complete and you have those results internally for your team, but then we actually prompt the families to go ahead and leave a Google review as well. And more often than not, they do. We actually began tracking for that earlier this year. And so far, we have 43% of those who left a survey are leaving a Google review, and they're taking the time to do that. And that really just helps your business overall. Now, I also mentioned here verbally. Verbally is very important. It's all going to come back to the experience that families are having in the service room with your funeral directors. So funeral directors should be verbally mentioning both the survey and the Google reviews in order to help your business and to help you guys gain more. So Performance Tracker X, as I mentioned, we do have that pop up at the end of the survey that allows families to leave a Google review. Now, not only is this going to help you gain more Google reviews, but it's going to help you be able to follow up with the family and continue that relationship. As I mentioned with that lead generation alert earlier, should you not receive a lead on a survey and families leave that list blank, this allows you another opportunity to reach out to the family and thank them for completing their Google review. And what's really special about Performance Tracker X is you can actually do that directly in our platform. You don't have to go out to Google, you don't have to go out to Facebook, all the different ways. If you connect your Facebook page, your Twitter page, your Google account to our platform, then you can manage everything within the system. So if it's okay with you guys, I am going to go ahead and take you out to our platform really quick of Performance Tracker X, just so you can see what I'm talking about. I promise this is not a full demo of our program. If you would like a full demo, I'd be more than happy to provide you one. You'll just have to reach out to me separately. But I do want to show you a couple of things in here while we're talking about social media performance. So as you can see in here right now, I'm logged in as a Mankey executive user. So Mankey is actually the funeral and cremation center that our owner, Jake Johnson, owns here in Phoenix, Arizona. It's actually Sun City, Arizona. Now, unfortunately, they are so perfect that we're not going to see a lot of negative reviews on their Google page, but you can see that we do have an API with Google. So through our platform, we pull everything in from Google. And this is that Google icon, so that little place mark icon of showing that it's a Google review. Now, if Mankey were to connect their Facebook page as well, then there would be a Facebook icon that shows up here, which we can absolutely do for any of our Performance Tracker clients. And you can see if I go into view details, you can see the entire survey, the review response, because this is a public review. And you can see the comment that the family left. You can actually have the ability to respond as well. If I select respond, it automatically connects to their Google business account and it will send it to the family since they are already connected on Google with their business API. So it's pretty intuitive in letting you not only receive more Google reviews, but also manage the entire social media responses that you're receiving. One of the things that I do like to highlight in here as well is our competitor reviews. Now, I do have a slide on this in the slide deck, so you guys can reference it after our webinar is complete. But just so you have a visual for today's purposes, I do want to show you the live system of tracking anyone online in terms of your nearby competitors. So if I go to the physical location of Mankey, it's going to load any nearby competitors that they have. Oh, and we don't have a competitor list in here for this. I'm so sorry. I thought Mankey was using this feature. But if they were using it, they would actually see all of their rivals here, and they would be able to compare their scores over time. And then you would be able to see the competitor reviews as well. So here, if I just go in and I want to switch my view so I can show you guys this. So this is another location that's currently using Performance Tracker. As I mentioned before, this is social media responses. So these are all public online reviews. I'm not sharing any private information here. It's all available online if you Google the location. So you can see they have a couple of their location competitors in here, and you can compare how they are doing compared to how their rivals are doing. One of the things I want to point out right away, obviously the volume of reviews is substantially more with this location. And then you can see they do have a negative in here, but because they have more, they are going to be receiving a lot higher SEO, a lot more traffic and click-through rates through their search engine optimization. So the rivals here, this is kind of the scenario that I pointed out when I was talking about Yelp and restaurant reviews, which is kind of funny. I mean, I just clicked on this one randomly. But you can see they only have 2 reviews. They have a perfect 5. So they've got 5 stars across the board on Google, whereas this location has a 4.7, but you can see that they took the time to go in and respond to families, which I could look for on my social reviews page here. They can see all of the comments, positive and negative, and you can see scores over time as well. So being able to look at those reviews in real time and seeing the data that's related back to them is really something that's very special about Performance Tracker, as well as having that ability to promote the survey or the review after the survey is taken. And while I'm in here, I just want to quickly show you, Vince, I promise not to take too much time on this, but I do just want to point out our alert summary chart as well. So for any of the locations that we have in Performance Tracker, you can see all of the active new, in progress, overdue, escalated alerts. Obviously, with your system, you would only be able to see your active alerts that are in the system and that are being managed currently, but that's primary way that the system is really used for managing the entire customer experience, because not only can you see when you have a new review that needs to take place, but you can go into that particular review. So let me click on one of these. Let me go ahead and open this one. This is a promoter alert, it looks like. So you can see there's a lead generation attached to this. So like I mentioned earlier, we have those leads coming in. If I want to respond to the family, I can do it through email via the dashboard here directly. And then all of the communication on the alert would show up under the activity. So anything that's responded to the family on this can be taken care of right here in the dashboard. You can assign it to different team members. If you want the funeral director to handle it directly, then you can. If it's a pre-need lead, let's say they selected prearranged funeral cremation services, you can assign it to your pre-need sales team if you'd like. So it looks like this family is looking for grief support and benefits information, and the funeral home has the ability to reach out to them as needed. And then you can close out the alert and leave any notes that you need. Now on detractor alerts, which Mickey doesn't have a ton of detractor alerts. Like I said, they have pretty positive reviews. I'm not tooting Jake's horn or anything on that. They have really great reviews at Mickey. But if we were to go into a negative one, you could see the case management form for the actual detractor that occurred. So this was a service that happened, let's see, back in February, but the response was received back in March. So you can see that a case management form, let's see. I don't think that they left a case management form for this one. So again, it's an example, and Minky doesn't have a ton of negative responses here. But they are able to go in and create that case management form, leave any notes or activity on the case, and track those over time with Performance Tracker. So it's kind of just a little preview of our platform. If you guys would like a full demo of the system and have questions on that, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And like I said, I have these slides in here so you can check them out at your own convenience when you're reviewing the deck from today's webinar on competitor rankings. Now, I am going to pass it back over to Vince here really quick. Vince, I'll let you go ahead and share your screen again. I just wanted to make sure I touched on those points for social media reporting.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Yeah, it's very important, obviously, for the reasons you described, and something we watch very carefully for our clients. Um, One of the things that we want to wrap up with today is, again, another way in which we blend the customer experience survey data with the sales data for the benefit of our clients and the workplaces of our clients. If you ask any funeral professional what are the top 3 challenges that you face in the profession these days, I guarantee you one of those top 3 is going to be finding and retaining good employees, your team, right? And the other challenge that might be up near the top is salaries and wages. How do you remain cash flow positive and a sustainable organization for the future? Our solution, or one of our solutions, I should say, to that issue or challenge is to implement incentive compensation plans. And I just wanted to sort of wrap up today with a general overview of some of the key metrics that come out of the survey program and performance tracker in general that are used in our quarterly incentive plans. So Nelson last week talked about creating a revenue budget and managing to that budget month to month, quarter to quarter. We want to, of course, use those budgeted average sales as a metric for our funeral arrangers. That really constitutes what it means to be a sustainable organization financially, is to be producing some of those targeted average sales. As or more important, however, is the client family satisfaction. So we're always layering or building into our incentive plans the OPS, or the client family experience, as it relates to your funeral directors, your arrangers. Another component, as you see listed there, is days sales outstanding. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's really a metric associated with accounts receivable. How many days of average revenue are outstanding or on the books? Obviously, that can be a real influencer of cash flow and a challenge financially for any operator. We oftentimes tailor the incentive plans to specific job categories. That's one of the last examples there. Yes, we can have embalmers or care center employees as part of the plan, as well as administrators. And all those metrics come directly out of the survey program. So you see here, I've just taken a snapshot of some of the arrangers at particular locations. And you see in the column, it's the second one from the right, funeral home OPS. Those are the individual overall performance scores for each one of the arrangers. And we look quarterly at those scores and build those into our incentive plans for our clients. Our incentive plans are generally facilitated quarterly so that we are ensuring that they're top of mind quarter to quarter. They're also built on the premise that the company needs to be healthy. There needs to be a qualifier of call volume or revenue that is met for these payouts to be made. But we found that it really keeps employees and teams engaged. They have a clear understanding of what the expectations are, not only for client family experience, but also for the financial well-being of the funeral home business itself. So again, just a little bit of a scratching of the surface of how our CX metrics and performance tracker is used in the incentive compensation plans. Happy to talk more with any of you in a separate call if this is something you're interested in.
I do want to add too, we rank response rates as well. So response rate is a big factor in qualifying for an incentive compensation, and it's able to be ranked within performance tracker as well, not just the scores.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Taylor. And obviously, for reasons we covered today, you want to have a high response rate. It's going to provide you better intel for the value of your funeral consumer by case type, by arranger, by location. You're also going to get a better sample for marketing return on investment analyses like we demonstrated today. And you're also simply going to get a better understanding of your overall customer experience. Hopefully, in our time to get together today, you've sort of taken a better understanding, or maybe grown in your understanding about growing funeral home businesses through CX. And I think it's safe to say we know that we need to be a world-class customer experience type of company to be a type of company that is growing market share through customer experiences. And John talks in his book about the three things that separate the best from the rest. And so I just wanted to leave you all with this today before we perhaps open it up for a few questions. But the three things that separate the best from the rest: to make yourself a world-class customer experience company, to grow your market share using customer experience. Your leadership needs to be obsessed with the customer experience down to the smallest detail. You need to be making your employees walk in the shoes of your customer, utilizing that survey data daily, weekly, monthly, and then also crafting those service standards that I referenced, creating a very clear expectation, putting together a CX playbook, if you will, to ensure that the experiences are consistent and that your teams have the autonomy to go above and beyond and really create those exceptional experiences for your families. So again, I thank you for your attendance today, and I think we have a couple minutes, if I'm not mistaken, if there are any questions. If not, you'll of course have the slides and our contact informations on the screen, and always happy and willing to hop on a separate call with anyone here and talk through any of the topics that we referenced today. But Taylor, I'll turn it back over to you to close things out.
Great. Thank you so much, Vince. As Vince said, thank you all for joining. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to join today. It looks like we do have a question from Victor. Victor, I know you are a current client of Performance Tracker, so if you could, you can bring yourself off mute. You can type it in the Q&A section, whatever is easiest for you. Here. I might have to take him off of mute. No. Allow mic. Here we go. Thank you. All right. Victor, if you want to take yourself off mute now, I enabled your mic. Or if you're typing, that's fine as well. And of course, if anyone else has questions, please feel free to let us know. All right. Can Performance Tracker be customized to cremation? Yes, I'll take that one. Yes, absolutely. So we actually have 6 different business segments of the survey. So it's not just funeral. We do funeral at need, cemetery at need, cremation at need, pre-need surveys for each of those segments as well. And we also have a combo survey. So yes, we can absolutely do a cremation specific survey. And actually our cremation survey, if you do online cremations or low cost cremations, as they're sometimes referred to, we ask if the experience was done over the phone, online, or in person. And all of those features are customizable with the program as well. Affordable. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Victor. All right. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up then, unless we have some more questions, leave it open a little bit. I see some familiar names in the chat, but thank you all for joining today. You'll receive a recording of this session as well as Vince and my contact info if you want to screenshot it, or you'll receive it in an email shortly. But have a great afternoon, and thank you for joining our 2-part webinar series. Thank you, Vince.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.